Here's the chat box. Anything is fine. Good evening all. Okay. So my name is Manjunath. I will be taking polity classes, polity and governance obviously, and then optional public administration. But as of now only we will be talking about polity concepts. How many of you are from batch 2? So others are like demo classes and few others. Huh? Batch 1 भी है? Batch 1 I had already done. Okay, 2024 batch 1 you guys. Okay, I thought 2023 batch 1. Fine. Okay, so first let's discuss the basics. If you have seen the previous UPSC questions, prelims questions and all, what is the importance of polity in prelims? Like how many questions you will get? Just to give you an idea, if you don't know by now, because, and how many want to give prelims this time? Okay. You have already revised polity a little bit, or it's like fresh, starting now? Starting now? Okay, fine. So prelims, on an average, you will get somewhere around 13 to 15 questions. This is in prelims we are telling. Fine. And then mains if you take GS2, fine, you can actually subdivide it into 4. One is polity, governance, social justice, international relations. So if you analyze from the last 2013 to 2022 papers, polity will be approximately 10 questions. Means you can take it as around 120, 125 marks. Governance will be somewhere around 2, sometimes 3 questions. So you can take it as somewhere around 25, 30 marks, let's say 30 to 30 marks you can say. Fine, social justice again will be around 4 to 5, again depending on variation. So you can take it as around 50 marks. Fine. Then IR will be exactly 5 questions. IR will be 5 question, matlab kitna? 50 marks. So 5 marks here and there depending on is it a 5 marker, sorry, is it a 10 marker, is it a 15 marker, the distribution will vary, but this is an average distribution. If you take from the last 10 years you can say 2013 to 2022 papers. So this is the one, 10 question, 2 questions, 2 to 3, 5, somewhere around 4, 5, 50 marks, 50 marks. So on an average, if you combine polity and governance, you will get 150 marks. That is the overall distribution. Social justice 50, IR 50. If social justice is 40, 45, then increase for governance. Fine, this is the basic distribution. Now and then, so which sources we should study? Because let's clarify those basic points first. For polity, which sources should we refer? The sources that we should refer, first is obviously for your conceptual clarity, we need more of NCERTs. So obviously we will be having an idea by now. So which NCERT should we refer for that? So totally 4 NCERTs. Don't take any NCERT for granted. First is your Democratic Politics, Part 1, Part 2. So 2 NCERTs, then Political Theory, then Indian Constitution at Work. So these are the 4 NCERTs that you have to mandatorily study. Democratic Politics Part 1 and Part 2, Political Theory and Indian Constitution at Work. Then obviously with reference book everybody will be having an idea, which is that any edition of Lakshmikant is absolutely fine actually. Let us say for example you started last year in your final year of degree, so and then you have already bought whatever 6th edition or 5th edition. Now they have released another new edition, so that they keep telling that so they have added 2 new chapters, 3 new chapters, wo bhi kharidna hai kya? So obviously it is not necessary. Stick to any edition of Lakshmikant that you have. Even the first edition of Lakshmikant is also actually okay, because there is constitution wise there is no major additions. Some new amendments are there, but that anyhow you can study. So just because they add a new chapter, you don't have to buy another Lakshmikant. Absolutely not necessary. Any edition of Lakshmikant is absolutely fine. You have already studied from 1 or 2 years. You don't have to buy any new edition. Stick to it. Sir, then what about D.D. Basu? If you have the doubts, what about D.D. Basu? What about Subhas Kashyap? So Bakshi, Vosab, so obviously they are very good books, no doubt about it. Even for law students also, if anybody is from law, they can tell they study D.D. Basu and he has written what? 8 or 10 editions he has written completely about Indian constitutional work, but that is not for exam perspective. So from exam, there is competitive exams or UPSC exam perspective, this is the much better book. So because if you study so many other books and you study Lakshmikant, what he has done is he has compiled every other book and then written the synopsis. Fine, if you directly study Lakshmikant, it is more than enough. You don't have to study any other ones. Please don't fall behind knowledge and feel, nahi main wo bhi padhta hu, ye bhi padhta hu, so obviously so that I'll get more content. So please don't fall behind that, because you don't have to have about huge content. So what you need is conceptual clarity. So that is the most important. Fine. So then in addition to book, so please download Constitution app. There are so many apps available. Please download that, because the more and more you keep seeing the Constitution language or what they have written exactly in, let's say, Article 14, what are the exact words written there. So the more you will get a clarity, because most of the times, at least from the last 2-3 years, you might have seen they keep telling, is it mentioned in the Constitution? This term is mentioned in the Constitution. This term is defined in the Constitution. Constitution gives it explicitly, implicitly, like that. At least 3-4 questions they ask in prelims. Or in general also, you should understand the structure of Constitution to get an idea. So keep use it for reference, not like every day you have to keep on referring. Anything you have a doubt, okay, what is this schedule and all those things, if you have a doubt, you should keep going and referring to it. The Bayer Act, what they famously call it as, but typically as for us, take it as Constitution app. Clear? Yeah, so then we'll start with the topics then. What we'll do is, first we'll understand some basics of, in Indian Constitution at Work, you have chapter 1, which is, what do you mean by a constitution? Why do you need a constitution? What are the simple, like the core functions of the constitution? Why Indian constitution to an extent succeeded when other constitutions, if you compare across the country, why did they fail? So all those, some basics are there. We'll start with that. So before that, see, we keep referring to the word, let's start with the basics. We keep referring to the word polity. Now what do you mean by polity then? Polity ka matlab? Form of government. Okay. Any other ideas? Correct. More or less related itself. Because politics we keep telling. But then what do you mean by polity then? So polity is actually, it's a form of government or the entire system of the government, those details that you have, that is called as polity. For example, when you say Indian polity, that means what kind of system do we follow? Do we follow parliamentary system? Do you follow federal system, in presidential system? Do you have a unitary system? Do you have a federal system? Fine. Do you have a written constitution or you don't have a constitution? What is the relationship between center and state? Fine. And then legislature, executive, judiciary. There do you have unicameral there, or you have bicameral system, or you have independent judiciary, or a kind of those details, the system of the government is what you call it as polity. Fine. Polity means in simple words system of government. We will discuss all those things. There are various terms we have to discuss. What do you mean? Because these are basic classes. Morning actually we are doing the revision class for prelims. There we will just keep telling directly the differences. But here assumption itself is what? That we are starting with basics means you have to start a little in detail, so slowly. So that's why, so there the pace will be different, here pace will be different. For example, you have so many keywords like if they keep telling, for example, 2021 question, what is the best definition of state, the term state? So so what do you mean by state? What do you mean by government? What do you mean by country? What do you mean by nation? Nation state, state nation, like that multiple keywords are there. We will go to that. But this is the basic one, system of government. What do you mean by government? We will get to that, we will understand. As of now, take it as which system are you following? Parliamentary or presidential, unitary or federal, independent, what do you call as this? So how many organs do you have? What is the relationship between different organs? That is called as polity. Clear? And now, then how do you define the term constitution then? How can you define the term constitution? We keep telling obviously constitution. What is the basic definition?
It's a document adopted.
Law of the land.
Document adopted by a country to govern itself.
Document adopted by a country to govern itself. Okay, fine. Any other definitions? This is more or less correct, but if you want to define it more in detail, we will discuss that. For example, constitution means it can be defined as what? You can note down please. First you can write what do you mean by polity, please note down. And normally my style of teaching, I will just tell you that so that you have an idea. So wherever you are writing, just leave some margins in the, just leave some margins in the sides, because so many extra points we will keep getting, you may not be able to add in the normal ones. So examples, this, that, everything you can add there. If you feel like taking a running notes, whatever you want to note, please note it. At the end, whatever important points are there, I will tell you that. Kind of a dictation also I will do. But while explaining, so many things will relate. That all I can't explain. So that is your duty. Please keep noting it as a running note. Important points, leave it to me, that I will take care. Clear? Yeah, so that is the point. So polity means is a system of government present in a country. It's a system of government present in a country. That is called as, in simple words, polity. Fine. So then what do you mean by constitution, sir? It is a document or set of documents. It is a document or set of documents. It is a document or set of documents which talks about various organs of the government. That means in simple words, your legislature, executive, judiciary, which talks about various organs of the government, their functions and responsibilities, various organs of the government, their functions and responsibilities, and the interrelationship between them. That means how each organ will check another organ, all those things. Their functions, responsibilities, and the interrelationship between them. Interrelationship between them. Right? So this is the basic idea. Actually it means what? Constitution talks about the details of what? Polity. That is a link. The details of polity, where do you find? In your constitution. Understand in your country what is a polity, what is a system. So you should refer what? You should refer your constitution. That is a basic idea. Details of polity are mentioned in the constitution. Hence the details of polity are mentioned in constitution. Details of a country's polity is mentioned in Constitution. Fine. Now before going to other details, okay, so let's write another point, please note down. Constitution can be written or unwritten. Constitution can be written or unwritten. Unwritten in the sense you may not have a specific document. Constitution can be written or unwritten. Fine, just mention few points. US Constitution is US Constitution is the first written constitution. US Constitution is the first written constitution. Is the first written constitution. Most of the democracies are written constitutions. Democracy across the world. US, France, Canada, Australia, South Africa, India, most of the democracies across the world have written constitutions. So then what is the only exception? UK, Israel, do not have written constitution. Even New Zealand to an extent. UK, Israel do not have written constitution. So what do you mean by that? It means there is no one single document. UK, Israel do not have written constitution. It means they do not have a single document. So obviously you can ask, sir, why is it like that? When they don't have a constitution, how will they govern themselves? So you can easily have that question. मतलब बहुत सारे obviously problems आ जाते हैं, so there will be a lot of confusions. So it doesn't mean that they don't have a constitution. They have a constitution, but like how we have in Indian constitution, like a one single document, Article 1 to Article 395. In the beginning you have preamble, and then at the end you have schedules. Like that you don't have one particular document. That's it. Whatever those rules, for example, in UK you have House of Commons, you have House of Lords, there is head of the state is Queen, head of the government is Prime Minister, so it is a unitary system, it is a parliamentary system. All those details obviously are there. They are mentioned in various acts, not in one particular book or one particular document. That's why we keep telling they don't have a written constitution. So, and another basic point is the idea of having a written constitution is mostly post French Revolution idea. Like that, yes, we should have one particular document was a, it was not like a old culture. Even if you look at, say, Indian rulers, whatever it is, so you will not have the concept of written constitution. That came up only in the last, let's say, 1770s, 1780s. So post only that, this concept started. 1770s or 1780s you can say. That's why look at it. US became independent, American independence, if you all those things if you have studied, 1777 to 1782. Their constitution came into force in 1787. So that means during whatever countries became independent after that, they have written constitution concept, not before that. So hence UK became independent when? Or UK kind of the process of democracy in UK started in which year? 1215. Correct. 1250 is the UK starting point of the democracy. Remember, UK all of a sudden has not become, if you take India, the moment you get Indian constitution, so many things change. From August 15, 1947, completely system got reversed. January 26, 1950, 100% reverse ho gaya. So obviously that means what, we became a sovereign country, democratic republics, so many things change. But UK does not have a, or what do you call as kind of radical change. That's why they keep telling UK is an evolving, that means what, evolutionary democracy, step by step it has evolved. So 1215 is the landmark year of your, which one? Magna Carta. UK, Magna Carta 1215. That means what is it? So keep noting down please. It's a set of rights set of rights issued by 1215 Magna Carta, set of rights issued by King John, set of rights issued by King John to not everybody, not all the citizens, set of rights issued by King John to the barons, or you can call it as nobles, the common word. Take it as zamindar kind of a one, landlords. Set of rights issued by the British King John to the British nobles. Nobles means, in simple words, to make it an Indian version, take it as zamindars. So it is not for all. So, but that is the first document in the world related to rights of somebody. So then what happened? From then on it has gradually evolved. Then the British Parliament came. So then so many things started to completely change. So that is the reason, because it has evolved over a period of time. Look at it, 1215 to till now, how many years? Almost around 800 years. So they have never felt, because ultimately, because a lot of people keep having this confusion, how can UK be successful without having a written constitution? First point, you have to understand, what is the need of any constitution? To ensure stability in the society, to ensure that you are responding for the needs of the common man, to ensure that there is no major disturbances, all those things. That even without a constitution, UK is able to ensure it. People are having fundamental rights, liberty, there is a system, there is stability, everybody is functioning according to their power, there is no major misuse of it. So then why do you have a constitution then? What is the need for a constitution? Anyhow, the goal is already met. Goal is not having a constitution, is not the goal. Having constitution is what? Means you understand. It's the path, it is not the goal. So goal anyhow they are able to achieve. That is the reason they felt you don't have to have a written constitution again. In fact, like let's say around 15-20 years back, 2008-2009 May, I think they conducted a kind of voting or referendum in UK asking that do you want a written constitution? That means should we again change everything and then make like how India has made a constituent assembly, all those things, should we have a written constitution for UK? And most of the people in UK said there is no need. Because if you start making again a written constitution, so many things will change in the system. Hence they felt anyhow the system, like how they keep telling in polity, even in administration we keep telling, do not change the system which is functioning well. If there is a problem, if somebody is having an issue, let's say for example if king is misusing the power, then aapko kya karna padega? You may have to limit power. Let us say your parliament is not functioning well, then what you have to do? Bring reforms in the parliament. Your judiciary is not functioning well, reforms in it. When it is already functioning well, then why do you need many reforms? UK, we all know, one of the most successful democracy in the world economically. Now of course they are facing few problems economically, all those things. But in general you don't have, like for example the problem you have in Afghanistan or Pakistan, that kind of a problem you don't have in UK. So necessity kya hai then? That's why they felt you don't have to make a separate book, system is already functioning well, let us continue with the same. Because when you make written constitution, then a lot of people will question about the concept of monarchy. Because when you are making a constitution, that means literally you are going for a democracy in general, broadly. What a lot of people tell? Take this person, take the king out. That means you have to change the system a lot. So that's why a lot of people feel absolutely not necessary, just stick to it. Clear? Got an idea why they don't have a constitution? Because it's an evolving, it's evolutionary democracy and system already has achieved its goal. Goal in the sense, stability that wise. Hence there is no need. Even it is the same case actually in Israel also. Remember the context of Israel, but was surrounded by so many Arab countries, right from Palestine to Saudi to Iraq, everybody. Even they have passed their people that should we have a written constitution. Again, if you have a written constitution, what will happen? So many things will become rigid. Rigid ka matlab, once you write it there in the constitution, you can't change easily. If you want to change, then what do you have to do? Amend the constitution. And Israel is in a very, very flexible, very fragile situation. Fragile matlab, too many things are going on around them and they don't want to take that risk. They want the system to be, they have to change as quickly, like let's say defense, something they want to change. The system they want to change, they should be ready to change. That's why they also have said there is no need, let's stick to it. Again the same, system is largely functioning well, so there is no need. That's the idea. Fine? Okay. So that's the basic idea. Now there are some other concepts. Before that you have to understand another basic is, put the heading, separation of power. Another basic, separation of power. Then we'll go back to constitution, all those things. Voice is not clear. One second, one second.
है ना बैटरी का इशू
Sure. Sanya, chat box. Please internet check करो कि वो वीडियो इज बफरिंग चैट बॉक्स में है. Okay, fine. Let's continue. So we'll discuss first separation of power, then constitutionalism, then we'll come back to the constitution again. So separation of power, basic. Who gave the idea of separation of power? Of charge is there. I think I'll manage using it.
हाँ तब तक आ जाएगा. हाँ ठीक है, nice. Okay.
Okay, sorry for the disturbance. We'll continue. So separation of power. So just try to recall who has given this idea. Yeah, idea is given by Montesquieu. Montesquieu, again you can trace it to which one? French Revolution itself. Of course, if you look at the historical evolution, so many have talked about this idea of separation of power, even right from Aristotle to Socrates, even during till that time obviously trace. But in the modern times, the idea was given by Montesquieu, French Revolution. Fine. The basic definition, French Revolution in his work, separation of power itself. What is the basic idea? That you should have three organs: legislature, executive and judiciary. Legislature for obviously what is the reason? To make laws. Executive to implement laws, and judiciary to adjudicate or to interpret. Make laws, implement laws, and then interpret or adjudicate the laws. That means this judiciary will have the responsibility to tell whether a particular law is constitutional or unconstitutional, what is the meaning of that law. So those things the judiciary will take care. That is what is the meaning of the basic LEJ. Fine. Within the executive, again you can call it as political executive and permanent executive, but that's fine. That we'll do it later. Sir, why do you have to separate power first of all? Because it is to, the separation of power concept itself is to avoid concentration of power in an individual or organ. For example, the kind of monarchy you take in an individual or institution or organ, whatever you call it as, the idea is that to avoid concentration in an individual or an organ. For that you need separation of power. Remember we keep using this statement multiple times, even in options also we use, as very famously said by Lord Acton, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So if you give absolute power to anybody, that means you are corrupting them absolutely. So that is the reason the basic of democracy is you should never give anybody huge powers or absolute powers. You should all, and the moment you give power, proportionately you should give a check, means accountability also should be there. Actually you can note that that's a very famous statement. Like even in essay, ethics, you can keep using this, because as very famously said by Lord Acton. So these things, such things you can note somewhere in the margin. As said by Lord Acton, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So almost a related concept, you have another one, that is what we call it as, this was UPSC 2021 or 22 question also, constitutional state, or they may use the word constitutional government, or they may also use the word what is it? Constitutionalism. So all mean the same in a way. Remember, that's a very famous question of UPSC. Which among the following aptly describes constitutional state? Discuss that. or sometimes they may use the word constitutional government also. It doesn't mean that a government which is run based on a constitution, that is just a basic idea. It is actually a much broader one. Constitutionalism, constitutional state. Fine. So any idea what do you mean by constitutional state or constitutionalism? No, separation of power is there, but specific idea. The moment you have this, even you go check back your previous question also, we'll discuss it. The key word that you have to search for is this is the key word. Means what? Nobody should have absolute power, everybody should have limited power. That is the idea of constitutionalism. That is the reason we keep it is linked to separation of power. Clear? For example, what we tell is, let us say we keep taking two examples. So just listen to the example, you will get an idea. The one example is, which one? Germany under Hitler. So what they had? So even during, even under Hitler, Germany had a written constitution, but what they did not have? Had a written constitution, but no constitutionalism. What is the reason? Obviously it is because what? Because power was concentrated with Hitler. Now look at it. So we give a statement that written constitution ensures democracy, then what is the answer? Actually no. Or if they give a statement written constitution is mandatory for democracy, that is also no. We will discuss that. So hence, so you can just copy it. The first slide is, when you say constitutional state or constitutional government or constitutionalism, you are talking about limited government, limited powers. Fine. Then take first example. Germany under Hitler had a written constitution, but no constitutionalism, no constitutional state. For very simple reason, power was concentrated with Hitler. That is the reason you had a kind of, obviously we all know, that kind of a genocide against Jews and all those things. Now reverse the same equation. What is the other example? Just now we discussed it. Take UK example. Even then, even now, what they don't have? Obviously you don't have a written constitution. They don't have a written constitution, but what exists? Yeah, but it is a constitutional state, but constitutionalism exists. Anything you can write? But constitutionalism exists. What is the reason? Because there is limited government. That means power is not concentrated with anybody. So that is the idea. UK does not have a written constitution, but it has constitutionalism, because very simple one, constitutionalism doesn't mean written constitution, it means limited government. Because there is limited government. Clear? So hence clarify. Hence written constitution is a means. Hence written constitution is Fine. So written constitution is a means to ensure constitutionalism, but what is it not? It is not mandatory. It is not sufficient also. Written constitution is a means to ensure constitutionalism, but it is not mandatory. It is not sufficient. That means what? Just because you have a constitution, you will not have constitutionalism, or just because you don't have it, so it doesn't mean you will not have it. It is neither mandatory nor necessary or nor sufficient. It is neither mandatory nor sufficient. Fine. So this is very, it is neither mandatory nor sufficient. Clear? That is the basis of constitutionalism. Functions of constitution. That we'll discuss later. Constitutional morality will when we discuss fundamental rights. In simple words, morality means क्या होता है? Morality means what? Take as a kind of ethics, some values, some principles. So constitutional morality means the core principles or the core values of your constitution. Like for example, if you take Indian constitution, the key values that you find in your preamble, equality, justice, fraternity, those things are constitutional morality. But how did it evolve? In which cases has talked about it? So why is it important? Those things we'll discuss your doctrine of essential practices and constitutional morality all together in your fundamental rights chapter. But as of now, we're still talking about how the constitution has evolved, all those things. So let's keep it to that. So please put the heading functions of constitution. That means what does constitution do? First one, this is your NCERT itself. सब वही बोल रहे तो I think there is some issue.
हाँ आवाज क्लियर नहीं आ रही है.
It is working but break.
वैसे आवाज कितनी आ रही है देखना पड़ेगा. कम है ना थोड़ी सी.
3 पे 3 का तो ऑप्शन नहीं है.
I don't have to ask them. I'll start and I'll ask them. So those watching online, just confirm if it is fine now. Voice issue. Online students, please confirm. Okay, we'll continue. If any issue, please let me know. I think it is okay, maybe. Okay, so what were we discussing? Yeah, various functions of the Constitution. Huh.
सर फिश प्रोसेस उसको रीस्टार्ट करना है बस.
Okay, fine. So first one is we have written. Did we write anything or not yet? Please write. The first function is to ensure. The first function is to ensure coordination. The first function is to ensure coordination between. First function is to ensure coordination between various members of the society. It is to ensure coordination between various members, that is different diversity, you can say, coordination between the members of the society. So this is more than obvious, because you look at any society for that matter, it is very diverse. Matlab culturally, if you look at it, or religious or linguistic, whatever issues you take, there is too much of a diversity. So then when you have too much of a diversity, it is also a strength and it is also a challenge. It is a strength because it will give you multiple ways of, the perspective with respect to the life or whatever issues. But why is it a challenge? The majority minority issue, superiority inferiority issues, which language has to be given predominance, which language or which religion has to be considered as the official religion, all those issues will come. Just look at the various examples across the world. You look at Sri Lanka example. So fine, in Sri Lanka, obviously recall what is the problem there. In Sri Lanka you have the problem of what? Sinhalese versus Tamils. Fine, so Sinhalese is a majority, Tamils is a minority. Sinhalese has somewhere around 80-82% of the population, Tamils is somewhere around 17-18%. So obviously Tamil language they speak, Sinhala they speak, their language is, I mean their religion is mostly Buddhist Sinhalese. Tamil is either, it is a combination, mostly Hindus, some few are Muslims are also there, so I mean some few Christians are also there. So automatically what happened, you might have seen, obviously the problem of LTT and all those things, because Buddhism was declared as the official religion, because Sinhala was considered as the official language, over a period what happened, that led to a kind of revolution or rebellion, whatever you call them as, a kind of terrorism act or whatever, led by, obviously you would have heard the famous the group called as LTT. What is the reason? The reason is because they could not ensure coordination between this diversity. They could not ensure that they all live together. That is a problem. Find diversity becoming a problem. Same example you look at another country, take across India itself, you take the example of Myanmar. Fine. And obviously the most of them, the majority religion is Buddhist. But then obviously we know, what is the problem related to whom? The problem related to Rohingyas, who are the Bengali Muslims. So language is different, because the most spoken language will be Myanmarese or Burmese, we call it as, and the religion is Buddhism versus, so like that. So that also led to the problem which we all know, a lot of illegal, I mean they have fled the country, so they have gone to Bangladesh, most of them have come to India also, they have settled even in Indian around Delhi, Kashmir, like that. So again the problem in Myanmar. Or you take the very famous example of Hitler itself, Christians versus Jews, that is also the same. So what does that indicate? Diversity is a strength, but diversity is also a huge challenge. If you don't handle diversity properly, so then so many issues will come up then. Or you go back to Rwanda and look at it. Remember we keep telling in 1990s there was this infamous genocide in Rwanda, African country, between whom? Hutus and Tutsi. Again ethnic differences, so same issue. Hutu versus Tutsi, all of them indicate that it is very important to handle diversity. Fine, please note down all these examples. Take the example of Sri Lanka, Sinhalese versus Tamils. Fine. Sinhala versus Tamil. Sinhala means, take it as the majority, religion is Buddhism, language is Sinhala language. Tamils, the name itself says Tamil language, and most of them Hindus, few of them Muslims, few of them Christian also. Buddhism and Sinhala, Hindus, Muslims and Tamil language. So that is what is led to the problem of LTTE. Then the Myanmar problem, Buddhist and Myanmaris, Rohingyas, Bengali Muslims. Clear? Then even in other country if you take, even if you check Germany issues, so that is one major function. Now automatically you have to discuss a second function, that for example when you say we need to ensure coordination between various members of society, that means what? You need some laws, you need some rules. Obviously thoda rules to karna hi padega, that no, there will be no official language, or there will be no official religion, or everybody will have the fundamental rights, everybody will have liberty, you have the freedom of speech, expression, so many things you have to mention. So automatically what is your next function then? So that is your next one. Second function of the constitution is to mention the details about the law making authority, because obviously when you want laws and rules, someone has to make those laws. So who is that? Is to mention the details about the law making authority, is to mention the details about the law making authority, or about the legislative authority, most important one, about the law making authority. Clear? Now you have to go back to another few basics. Obviously we keep telling that what? Across the world, the most famous system is democracy as of now. Remember, actually we keep, you can also bring back Winston Churchill's statement to it. So what is that famous statement of Winston Churchill for this? Democracy is not the best form of government. Fine, but what is the idea? However, the other systems are more worse. Matlab, we have chosen democracy not because it is the best. What is it? Because it is the least worst. So like other systems like monarchy, other systems like dictatorship, they are very, very bad. Compared to that, democracy is much better. In fact, that is the reason if you have seen those Aristotle, Socrates and all, they keep telling what? When you say democracy, that means what? Majority rules. Now majority rules doesn't mean that it is actually the best government, but that is the least worst government we have. Clear? You can write that Winston Churchill statement somewhere in margin. According to Winston Churchill, who was the former British PM, according to Winston Churchill, democracy is not the best form of government. Democracy is not the best form of government. What is it? It is the least worst. That means compared to others it is better. It is not the best form of the government. It is the least worst compared to the other forms. It is the least worst compared to other forms. Clear? So that is about democracy. Now come back. We keep telling that democracy is based on the principle of which one? The moment you hear democracy, you should link to it. It is based on the principle of popular sovereignty. So keep noting, democracy is based on the principle of popular sovereignty. So look at the key words, popular sovereignty. Here popular means people. Sovereignty means what? Ultimate decision making authority. Ultimate decision making authority. Popular means people, sovereignty means ultimate decision making authority. In simple words, what does that mean? People will take the major decisions. That's what you call it as democracy. Popular sovereignty. People, ultimate decision making authority. Now then subdivide again. Remember we keep telling in democracy you can broadly divide it into again two types. One is called as direct democracy, another one is which one? Direct. Obviously the other one will be indirect then. Fine. So then what do you mean by direct democracy then? Direct democracy. Please note the definition again. Direct democracy. Here people will directly take part in direct democracy. Here people will directly take part in the decision making process. People will directly take part in the decision making process. That is called as direct democracy. Do you have direct democracies at present in the world? Which, yeah, actually by definition they are also not indirect. Within indirect we have direct. For example, remember we keep telling in India, you might have heard a concept called as Gram Sabha. Gram Sabha is a direct democracy by definition. But is India a direct democracy then? India is not. So that is that means in simple words, direct democracies used to exist in the past. Matlab when for example, remember in Vedic ages we keep using the terms called as Sabha, Samiti, Vidata, they are actually direct democracy. So direct democracy only functions when you have very, very less people. Maybe in thousands, maybe in a few thousands, fine. You can write that, where people directly take part in the decision making process. For example, during the Vedic age, during the Harappan civilization, all those things, during the ancient India, any words you can use. During the Vedic age, Sabha, Samiti, Vidata, Sabha, Samiti, Vidhata. Sabha, Samiti and Vidata were forms of direct democracy. Sabha, Samiti and Vidata were examples for direct democracy. Fine. But think logically, can you have direct democracy in a country, for example, if you take India with a population of around 140 crore, can you expect everybody to come and take part in the decision making process? Then when will you take the decision? How long will it take to take it? Imagine how many people you have to involve then. Even if you take out, okay sir, we will include only voters. Even if you take 18 plus, it will be at least around 100 crore, at least 90-100 crore will be there. How will you involve everybody in the decision making process? How do you assume that everybody will have that level of knowledge or enthusiasm to come and take part in the process then? And what if you take every decision based on yes or no? You cannot take decisions in democracy based on yes or no. So many things will be grey. Grey means what? You can't completely say yes or completely no. You have to make a lot of changes there, midway, mid path. So that's the reason no major, what do you call as this, countries with huge crores of population, nowhere in the world you can have direct democracy. So that means automatically, what is the next form then? Indirect democracy. Indirect, or you can also use the word, no, participatory is later. Representative democracy, yeah.
It means that direct democracy is not existing currently in any part of
Yes, no. By definition, it doesn't exist. Within indirect, you may have direct. Matlab, for example, in some countries, you would have seen like in Colombia, in Chile, you have a South American country called as Chile. They gave a referendum and they asked the people of the Chile, do you want so and so changes in our constitution? Referendum, technically called a referendum. That is an example for direct democracy. But Chile is not direct democracy. Chile is indirect democracy only. Within that, what do you follow? Direct democracy. For example, take India's Gram Sabha. Gram Sabha is an example for direct democracy. But if they give the statement India is a direct democracy, then what is it? India is not direct. India is indirect only. Within indirect, few direct democracy. Got it? For example, in Colombia, you would have seen that very famous Netflix series Narcos. In Colombia, they had conducted a referendum 2 years or 3 years back. So by Sanuel Mantos, I mean the then Colombian president, to finalize a peace deal with FRCA. FRCA is a rebel group, like assume India's Naxal group you have, same group you have in same kind of an ideology, all those things you have in Colombia also called as FRCA, Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. Fine, the deal was, because the problem is going on for 50-60 years, the president wanted to settle the issue once for all. Fine, but the people of Colombia rejected the peace deal. So it was a referendum and people rejected. So the deal failed, but he got the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts to finalize the deal. Samuel Mantos. It's fine, he had got a Nobel Prize also for that. Those are all direct democracy within indirect democracy, not directly. Got the point? We'll write the points, you'll understand. So please put the ending. Indirect or representative democracy. First identify that. In practice, direct democracies cannot exist. In practice, under indirect or representative democracy, please note down, in practice, what cannot exist? Direct democracy cannot exist in large countries with huge population. In practice, direct democracy cannot exist in large countries with huge population. And what is the obvious reason? This is because it delays the decision making process. In practice, direct democracy cannot exist in huge countries with large countries with huge population because it delays the decision making process. It delays the decision making process. Hence, practically, all the democracies are indirect democracy. That means we are talking about today. Hence, practically, all the democracies are indirect democracies. Practically, all the democracies are indirect democracy. Then why do you call it as democracy then? That's why it is a link. So it is like this. You have people and then you have the process of elections by whom you will get the elected representatives, and they go on to make. So this is the link, please copy it. People, and through the process of elections, what they do? Elected representatives you get, and those elected representatives, what they do then? They make the laws. That's why you call it as representative democracy. That means people are not directly making laws, their representatives are making laws. People, election, ER means elected representatives, they will make the laws. Elected representatives, you can call it as people's representative, anything. Fine. Again, if you want clarity, please write. The tools of direct democracy, all those things we'll discuss in your preamble chapter, because democracy we still have to discuss in detail. We are just mentioning few basics. Fine. So write another point. However, within indirect democracy, direct democracy may be used. That is left to the countries to decide. However, within indirect democracy, direct democracy may be used. Direct democracy may be used. Clear? So what is the example for this? For example, Gram Sabha is direct democracy. For example, Gram Sabha is a direct democracy, but what is India? Yeah, but India is an indirect democracy. For example, Gram Sabha is direct democracy, but India is, in general if you tell India, India is an indirect democracy. Fine. If you also want, just write that example. Referendums conducted across the world, for many issues they do it. Referendum, REFERENDUM, referendums conducted across the world. Referendums conducted across the world is also a tool of direct democracy. Referendums conducted across the world is also a tool, is also an example for direct democracy. Is also an example for direct democracy. If you want the recent one, please write the example. Recently in Chile, it is a South American country. Recently in Chile, referendum was conducted. Basically, referendum means, as of now, take it as you are asking for the people's vote. That's it, people's opinion. Recently in Chile, referendum was conducted with respect to changes in their constitution, amendments. Recently, a referendum was conducted in Chile with respect to changes in their constitution. And what the people said? People rejected the changes. That means people negatively voted. People rejected the changes. Whatever, that's ultimately left to the people to decide. So that means direct democracy within indirect. So that's why it is called as representative, because you have representatives. Some people also call it as, you can write another name. Some people also call it as what? Electoral democracy, because you are using the process of elections. So all mean the same. Electoral democracy. Then there are so many criticism part, because we still have to discuss democracy in detail, because this is, we are just talking about the form of government. But democracy is not a form of government, democracy is a nature of the society, but that part we will discuss in preamble chapter, because anyhow we have to discuss in detail. So another name, electoral democracy. So clear? The first function is to have some basic rules, whatever you call them as principle, to ensure coordination. Then second function is what? Who will make those rules? Who will make those laws? Obviously, in a indirect democracy, who will make laws? That's what is the link. Correct. So clarify that. Hence, in an indirect democracy, legislature makes laws. That is where you have your representatives. Hence, in an indirect democracy, legislature makes laws. In an indirect democracy, legislature makes laws. Now that comes, then comes your next question. For example, again linking back to Lord Acton's statement, let us say for example you have given the power to the legislature or to the people's representatives to make laws. What is the guarantee that they will not misuse it? Correct. Got an idea? Let us say for example you have given power to someone to make law. What is the guarantee that they will not misuse the power? When we keep telling power corrupts absolutely, what is the guarantee they will not misuse it? Maybe most of the legislators may belong to one language or one ethnicity, one religion, whatever, or they may have some kind of ideology, economic, political ideologies, they may try to impose it on others. Then what is the use of what we keep telling it as freedom, fundamental rights, liberty, privacy, dignity, so individual choice, wo sab kaha gaya then? Yeah, constitution is also a correct, constitution itself is a limitation. I mean, getting the question is you cannot just give power to someone. So the moment you give power, what aapko kya karna padega? Accountability, checks, that's your third function. Third function of the constitution is to ensure accountability, checks and balances. Third function of the constitution is to ensure accountability of elected representatives or of law making authority, any words you can use. Third function of the constitution is to ensure accountability of elected representatives or of legislature, any words. सबको क्या करना पड़ेगा? Hence, checks and balances. Hence, checks and balances is necessary. Checks and balances is necessary to prevent misuse of power. Checks and balances is necessary to prevent misuse of power. Checks and balances is necessary to prevent the misuse of power. Actually, you can write another statement also in margin. According to Madison, Madison was a very famous US judge like that. According to Madison, Madison, US, according to Madison, one organ should check another organ. So this is the base of democracy. According to Madison, one organ should always check another organ. One organ should always check another organ. Fine, that is principle of checks and balances. You can write various examples. For example, in India, ministers, that is minister means which organ then? Executive. For example, in India, ministers, or you can say in parliamentary system also. For example, in parliamentary system or in India, ministers, that is executive, is questioned by legislature. For example, in India, ministers, that is political executive, is questioned by legislature. So executive questioned by legislature. Fine. And in general, in any democracy, what will happen? Judiciary will check the performance or the actions taken by whom? Legislature and executive. Judiciary will check, question, any words you can use, the actions or decisions taken by legislature and executive. Judiciary will question the decisions taken by legislature and executive. Fine, these are all kind of checks and balances. There is also another one, for example, another one you can write. In addition, legislature cannot violate. In addition, In addition, legislature cannot violate fundamental rights of the citizen. That itself is a limitation. Checks. In addition, legislature cannot violate fundamental rights of these citizens. Remember, that is a huge detail, we will discuss. They cannot violate the fundamental rights of the citizens. That is also what? It is a check, it is a limitation. They are telling you what you cannot do, what you can do, all those things. That is the third function. Put limitations on the power, or put checks and balances on the power. Got an idea? Yeah, then next one. Next function, fourth function of the Constitution. Fourth function is to put certain responsibilities and obligations. The fourth function of the Constitution is to put certain responsibilities and obligations on the government, to put certain responsibilities and obligations on the government towards the people. Certain responsibilities or obligations of the government towards the people. Fine. Sir, what do you mean by that? You might have heard a very famous one in Indian context called as, remember we keep telling it as what? DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy. In simple words, of course details we will discuss in separate chapter. What does DPSP talk about?
Obligation of the government towards the citizen.
See, you have two. One is fundamental rights. Fundamental rights puts limitations on the government. That means what? It will tell the government that don't get into their personal life. Don't tell them what to eat, what to wear, which religion to follow, which language to speak, this, that. You don't have to interfere in that. What does DPSP tell? DPSP tell the government in simple terms that take care of their education, take care of their health care, give basic jobs for them, food for them, clothing, shelter. So livelihood, that is, you are telling the government to do something. What does fundamental rights largely do? They tell the government what not to do. That means, that's why we keep telling fundamental rights means what? Negative in character. Negative doesn't mean in polity bad. Negative means what? Not to do something. So DPSP are positive, not necessarily good, it means to do something. So not to do something, to do something. That is called as negative and positive, not the typical arithmetic negative and positive here. Fine. Yeah, that is the idea of fundamental rights and DPSP. So DPSP, for example, in South African Constitution, because South Africa has come through the concept of, remember, the apartheid, all those things, we all know that, right, even the Gandhian era, Nelson Mandela, all those things. South African Constitution explicitly talks about that the government should take efforts to completely abolish racial discrimination, because the country has a history of racial discrimination. That is also kind of what? They don't call it as DPSP, but the idea of certain responsibility on the government. Got it? That is another function of the Constitution. Fine. Early, and of course in a way these are all related to the idea of which one? Welfare state also, because at present all the democracies you can say, at least most of the democracies across the world are based on welfare state concept. So welfare state means, in simple words, we will discuss the evolution, all those things. In simple words, welfare state means what? The government should take care or should always think about the welfare of its people. Welfare itself is a broad term. Basically take it as quality education, quality health care, basic facilities like drinking water, sanitation, food, jobs, livelihood, that is the basic idea of welfare state. Got an idea? So every government is based on this idea, that means take care of your people. Earlier, like let's say, remember there is a concept, have you heard an idea called, we will discuss that evolution, I am just giving you a brief. Have you heard this idea? Laissez-faire state. So in laissez-faire state, government has no responsibility towards your welfare. The idea was that the government will, you people can take care of themselves, government doesn't have to worry. The role of government is just to empower you, give you certain conditions, market will take care of your welfare. But now it's not like that. Okay, we'll come to that later. Now let's write this. Did you write the fourth question state function? Yeah, it is to, I mean, what did we write? Certain responsibilities and obligations on the government. For example, you can write, for example, Indian Constitution talks about DPSP. For example, Indian Constitution talks about DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy. Indian Constitution talks about DPSP, and what is it? Which puts certain obligations on the government. Indian Constitution talks about DPSP, which puts certain obligations, on the government. Fine. If you want it just in bracket as of now till we understand DPSP, in bracket you can write quality education, healthcare, jobs, etc. Quality education, healthcare, jobs, etc. Quality education, healthcare, jobs, etc. Fine. Similarly, across the world if you want, similarly South African Constitution mentions that government should take all the efforts. South African Constitution mentions that government should take all the efforts to completely abolish racial discrimination. They should take all the efforts, measures to completely abolish racial discrimination. Clear? That is another kind of a positive one. Then first, before understanding the idea of state, let us not go to welfare state. Okay, next function. Constitution provides a political moral identity. Constitution provides a political moral identity. Constitution provides a political and moral identity for its people. It provides a political and moral identity for its people. Means what? It's an Constitution itself is an identity. For example, look at Indian Constitution. Look at the keywords in the preamble. Even if you have not studied in preamble in detail as of now, you can just recall the keywords. What are the keywords? Like you have keywords like equality, liberty, justice you have, fraternity you have. That is what they are telling is, for example, you take Indian context, you have so much of diversity. Our religion gives us certain values, our language or for our culture, our religion, so many identities we have, and everything gives its own kind of an identity, what to do, what not to do, all those things. But those are all your social identities, customary identities. That doesn't matter much to us. What matters more? What does the Constitution allow? What does the Constitution do not allow? That's what is summarized as constitutional morality. So that matters more, not the social or customary morality. Getting the point? So what your religion allows is your personal thing. What does the Constitution allow? That is the only thing that will matter. What does the religion not allow? That is another one. That's your social. What does the Constitution not allow? That is what matters. So that is the point called as what? You keep all your other identities aside. That's all your personal issues. In society in general, what is allowed, what is not allowed, who will tell? That the Constitution will tell. Or based on that certain laws are there, based on that laws they will tell. So that is the identity that they gave. And Constitution itself, for example, so many identities you have, as we again tell, but having a Constitution, having an idea that we all are in itself is the ultimate identity. That's what you call as political identity. Political identity means Constitution, we are all abiding with the same document. We all have one major identity called as Indianness. That is what you call it as political identity. Moral identity means what? Keep all your normal values aside. Fine. What does your religion tell, this tell, that is separate. What is our identity that you have to follow morally, value wise? What does the Constitution tell? That is a value system that you have to follow. That is what you call it as, it provides an identity, political, moral identity to the people. Got an idea? Please clarify. Clarify that. For example, India is a country with huge diversity. India is a country with huge diversity. India is a country with huge diversity. So automatically what you will get? This gives multiple identities. It is your regional identity, religious identity, linguistic identity, all those things. India is a country with huge diversity. This gives multiple identities to the people. Country with huge diversity, and this gives multiple identities to the people. Right? However, we all have to abide by one single document. However, all of us have to abide means follow, respect. All of us have to abide by one single document. One single document, that is the Constitution, irrespective of our identities, other identities. We all should abide by one document called Constitution, irrespective of our other identities. Irrespective of our other identity. Right? Again clarify. Supreme Court itself has said that constitutional morality prevails. Supreme Court itself has said that constitutional morality prevails. Constitutional morality prevails over social and customary morality. That means what is your tradition say, what does your society say, that is different. Constitutional morality prevails over social and customary morality. Over social and customary morality. Fine. Hence, what are the common values? Hence, values mentioned in Constitution like, hence values mentioned in the Constitution, values mentioned in the Constitution like equality, justice, values mentioned in the Constitution like equality, justice, fraternity is the common identity or is the common moral identity for all. Like equality, justice, fraternity, liberty, whatever, is the common moral identity for all. Common moral identity for all. Clear? So these are the first basics of what do you mean by Constitution, what do you mean by polity, what do you mean by separation of power, constitutionalism, what are the various functions, how various it has been misused across various countries. Now the second part of that first chapter, what you have to study is, you have to ask yourself, you look at countries across the world, forget about across the world, but remember we keep telling global north, global south. Global north ka matlab largely developed countries, US, North America, Europe, those ones. Global south means the Asian, African, Latin American countries. So global south is where you have most of the developing countries, most of the poor countries also. Right? And if you take entire global south, India is one of the rare examples which has succeeded as a democracy. Or you take just in and around India, you take Sri Lanka, you take Pakistan, you take Afghanistan, Nepal, Myanmar, China is a different example. So if you take so many other countries, most of them have failed one or other way. They have not succeeded to an extent that India has succeeded as democracy. You take Sri Lanka, so look at the LTT problems, all those things, and military will always, one or other issues will be there. You look at Pakistan, even now you might have seen, one or other way army will try to keep taking. Recently Parvez Musharraf died just what 2-3 weeks back. And obviously who was he? He was not elected by the people of Pakistan. What was he? He was an army general. No, he conducted a, remember we keep telling coup, C-O-U-P means come and completely take over the system. Now can you imagine that happening in India? It has never happened in Indian history in the last 73 years, and we can't even, and more, I mean in general we don't even see all these army generals in media also. Very rare, we may know the names when new army general is appointed or some issue is going on. You never see a major press conference, they never make any political statements. Fine, that means military coup concept itself is not. Myanmar even today is ruled by whom? Junta. Junta means take it as military. There they call it as junta power, but take it as typically military. Afghanistan, we don't even have to talk. Look at the situation of Afghanistan. Then why only India somehow escaped from this? And that too, look at the Pakistan issue. It was partition from India based on the concept of religion. By the definition of the typical European definition, Pakistan is an ideal nation. Definition wise, you have a common factor, one religion, major religion, one language, and all those things they used. So what is the assumption? Because if you have people belonging to one identity, you can stay together, work together, prosper better. Look at India. How many religions you have, how many languages you have, how many regional identities you have. Is there a commonality between Tamil Nadu and Punjab? Where is the commonality? Or look at Kerala, compare Kerala with Arunachal Pradesh. Where do you have? There is no commonality at all. Then how did we succeed then? Compared to other countries, we are actually very successful democracy. For that obviously multiple reasons are there, including the major one is the constitution contribution itself. Right from the constitution, what kind of values are mentioned there, what kind of leaders we had, how did the constituent assembly function, how the judiciary, technically we call it as balance of power or institutional design, how that balance matters a lot, even the idea of basic structure, all those things have contributed a lot. So those factors we need to study, like put the subheading, we will discuss after the break, put the subheading as factors which contributed to the success of Indian democracy or Indian constitution also. Factors which contributed to the success of Indian democracy or constitution. Fine. Whatever I give you the brief now, what are the values, how it was made, all those things we will discuss. Let us take some 10 minutes break. Factors which contributed to the success of Indian democracy or constitution. Any doubts till now? Whatever few basic points we have discussed. So then put the first point under factors that contributed to the success of Indian democracy or constitution. First one is composition of constituent assembly. Composition of constituent assembly. Composition of constituent assembly. Fine. So that is the first major factor that obviously contributed to the success of the constitution. So try to recall, obviously, at least constituent assembly. So what is the plan, cabinet mission plan, all those things we'll discuss. That's your next chapter called as making of Indian constitution. But the core point was that, so even after 1947 Act, the strength of the constituent assembly was 299. And if you look at the composition, matlab, who all were there, it had members from all the parts of the country. It had members belonging to more or less all kind of religious diversity, linguistic diversity, regional diversity, everything was there. That is what you call it as composition of constituent assembly. It was very, very diverse. It reflected complete India's diversity, even though what Congress had more than 80% of the seats. So what was ensured? That's why remember constituent assembly is criticized, we will discuss in your next chapter. Granville Austin, who is a very famous US political scholar, he says that Indian Constituent Assembly was a one-party body in a one-party country. Means the name itself says, that means it was typically a Congress body. But within that 80% members, what was ensured? You had members from all, even women were there, even members belonging to SC category were there, ST were there, Northeast were there, Central India was there, more or less South Indians were, more or less everybody were part of the assembly. Now automatically, sir, what is the use of it? You reverse the equation. For example, what if Indian constitution is only made by people from, let's say for example, some 4-5, the core, what you call it as the so-called heartland of India, the core 4-5 north states, UP, MP, Rajasthan or Bihar, only if those 4 states are form 80-90% of the members, then what will other part of the India think? What will the northeast people or what will the South Indians, Central Indians, what will they think? Obviously they will feel that this constitution does not represent our interest, it is only made by 4 or 5 dominant states. Or what if it is only made by men? What will the other 50% of the people think? That they do not represent our interest at all. Fine, so that is the reason always in a democracy, remember the core point is you have to ensure diversity. Fine, representation is a very, very important point in democracy. If you do not have representations, then people will revolt. That is one major factor, composition of Indian Constituent Assembly. We will first discuss the factors, then we will write. Then the next factor, which again, for example, whatever Indian, as I just now told, Congress had how many, more than what percentage of members? More than 80%, 82, 83% to be precise. Now let us say, if any provision in the constitution should be included by voting, based on vote, automatically who will dominate then? Automatically whatever Congress wants, they will easily dominate. Hence they did not go for voting. If you have looked at the provisions, the basic principle that was followed was deliberation, not voting. They followed the concept called as deliberation. In simple words, let us say for example, if you want to include freedom of speech and expression in the constitution, so first what you have to do? You have to deliberate. Deliberate means what? Discuss in detail about various pros and cons, advantages, disadvantages, various dimensions of it. First आपको discuss करना पड़ेगा. Let us say for example, if one member wants to add something to this provision, freedom of speech and expression, or he wants to put some limitations on it, take out one word from it. So then what you can do? Put forward those changes, then discuss those changes again. Finally, after deliberation, the idea was to achieve what? Consensus. Consensus means what? Consensus means broader agreement on a particular provision. In other words, more or less everybody should agree to it. So that means you are trying to make sure that everybody agrees. So that okay, you take their point, you take another point, add it, so try to come to a balance. If you had gone for voting, then what will happen? Let us say for example, Congress may stay in power for 5 years, 10 years, you never know, I mean after that we prevail. But in 49, how do you know that Congress will stay in power for 30, 35 years continuously? You can't imagine. After that it happened, yes, okay fine, till Rajiv Gandhi era Congress mostly dominated 40 years. But what is the guarantee that Congress will dominate in 1948 or 49? Let us say for example, Congress made a constitution only by direct voting. Now, what if another party came to power 5 years later or 10 years later? What they would have done to the constitution? What they will do? They will completely reverse the constitution and make a new constitution. Then India would have become Pakistan then. So that is the reason they did not go for direct voting. They largely followed what? Deliberation to achieve what? Consensus. If in case consensus could not be achieved, matlab what? If in case largely people did not agree, then at the final stage what they did? Finally, if you don't have an option, then go for voting. If you don't have an option, not the only option or direct option. So hence all this matters a lot.
Sir,
Reasoning, yeah.
as a mode of operation, what was the difference between voting and consensus? I mean, there has to be a difference between them, right?
Correct, obviously.
Right?
That's what I told you now. For example, voting means what? Let us say for example, you discussed a provision and then you go for voting. If you get 50, and let's say 100 people voted, 51 people vote, that means what? The point is passed. Consensus means what? No voting. More or less out of, if you have 100 people, 95, 100 people should say, then okay fine, like more or less almost 100% should tell, I have some confusions or I have some issues with this provision, but largely I am also yes for it. So consensus means take it as 90 to 100% people telling yes. Voting means what? 51.
An overwhelming majority.
Overwhelming is almost you can say universal, 100%. Yeah, that is called as consensus. If you have differences, settle the differences. Add your points there. They'll again discuss it. Finally come to a point. That is called as consensus. That's why consensus is actually more democratic compared to what? Voting. Because if you vote, who will dominate then? Majority will always dominate. But consensus में क्या होता है? You are asking for everybody's opinion. But in practice, normally we don't follow consensus. Reason, how long, I mean it will take lot of time to achieve consensus. It's not so easy. Let us say for example, if you follow consensus for your normal bills, so and so act, so and so amendment bill, when will you achieve consensus? Consider today's political parties, how many parties are there, how many people are there, how many differences are there? Practically it's impossible. That time because we are making the most important document, so largely they decided for that. Today in democracy you can't follow consensus, it's highly impossible. If you do it, that's very, very good. But practically, as I said, it's not so easy. Fine, that means what? It's like ensuring that BJP and Congress, when will you ensure it? How will BJP and when I don't know, where you have to recall when was the last time they both worked together. It's impossible practically because too much of politics is there today. That's why like let's say in administration we criticize that India is probably one of the over politicized country in the world. Means in India each and every issue is politicized. Matlab you take any issue, your education is, language is politicized, religion you live it. So religion, food, dress, what is not politicized you talk about it in India. Each and every single issue is politicized. So that's why India is one of the over politicized country in the world. Your caste, imagine the politics behind caste, the reservation one, this, that, I mean entire Indian politics itself is decided based on caste, society wise, your treatment, each and everything matters in India.
Even a tweet is politicized.
Huh?
Even a tweet is also
Yeah, I mean everything. Whatever you say on social media, Facebook, Twitter, absolutely everything. For each and everything you can give a political context. Where rarely it happens, this is because of India's diversity. Okay, fine. So let's not go to those issues. Got an idea? This is how it functioned also matters. For example, you look at other countries. Take Nepal itself for example. Nepal has made, this is I think 5th constitution. 4 constitutions were made by the king. If king makes the constitution, will he give for 100% democracy? If he gives for 100 democracy, what will happen to his power? Gone, kadam. Why will he agree for democracy then? So any constitution he creates, he created in such a way, his position is safe, others should listen to him. Why will people agree to that? Then again revolt, again redraft, again revolt, again redraft. Finally now they have come up with another constitution, which is also, it is not so easy. You might have seen even from the last 4-5 months, again there were some emergency majority issues, again is going on. So that shows you. You take France, right from French Revolution, the so-called we keep telling, this is, remember we keep telling France as what, this is the 5th Republic. 5th Republic means in the last 200, okay, how many years, 240 years, let's say 30, 40 years, 5 times entire constitution has been not amended, I am telling, completely new constitution, not like India's we have amended 105 times, not completely new constitution, changes. France 5th time completely redrafting the constitution. That means imagine how difficult is it. That too with their diversity, imagine with India's diversity. So that's why, that's the reason it is not so easy to manage. Fine. So like that many are there across the world. So that is a problem because they don't follow the deliberation and consensus. Fine, either the king will make, army general will make, some popular leader will make, 5 years it will stay, 10 years it will stay. But people will change, people in power will change. What will they do? They will make their own constitution. Fine, like that multiple, like Pakistan is having what today I think it is with the original one, then General Zia-ul-Haq, then I think this is 4th constitution or 3rd constitution for Pakistan, completely new. So those are all showing the loopholes if you don't follow these kind of principles. Right? Then another biggest advantage that India has, or Indian Constituent Assembly had, was the legacy of freedom movement. Because if you can recall, I think modern India has done, right, if you can recall your freedom movement, by 1920s and 30s itself, they more or less they had a broad idea what kind of country or what kind of constitution we should have. Recall Motilal Nehru report 1929, there itself if you can recall, they talked about fundamental rights, they talked about universal adult franchise, they talked about rights of minorities, they talked about what do you call as this women, most of the things they had talked about it. Then you had, remember Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel's what resolution on that economic rights in Karachi session, that talks about something what you have in DPSP today was mentioned in that Karachi resolution also. Fine. And then we had planning concepts, Subhash Chandra Bose headed group. So like that what kind of economy we should follow, the government should play a greater role, socialist kind of an economy, democracy we should have parliamentary system, all those were more or less pre-decided. Pre means before we made our constitution, you already have a broad idea. So what you do was just put those things in detail in the constitution. Let us say if you still have lot of differences as to should we follow democracy or monarchy, should we follow parliamentary or presidential, then constitution would have become largely controversial. Because there was largely consensus before itself, you have an advantage. That is the biggest advantage. That's why if you have a long freedom struggle, the biggest strength is country will sustain for long. Because people would have already had a kind of a nation kind of a feeling will already come. If you get a freedom very quickly, like you fight a war and then you get it, it's very difficult to manage. Because you don't know how to manage such kind of diversity then. Fine. So that's why all those things will matter. Then another major is the values mentioned, that's what is your equality, justice, all those things, because there is no discrimination for anybody, there is no official what, or we can call it as what, the formal language or religion, all those things are not there. So largely those Western values in a way contributed. So that's why look at it, lot of at that time also, like why we followed Western values, there is a criticism also there. For example, in Constituent Assembly there is a very famous criticism that what, that Indians expected the music of a sitar, but we got the music of a guitar. In simple words, what they are trying to say is what, we people of India expected a constitution based on Indian values, but you got a constitution based on Western values. That is one of the criticism. But what you have to also see, it doesn't matter where is the values originating, what matters is what, how much has it contributed to the country's growth. Fine, that kind of values like equality, justice, of course more or less are all European, even in India we have, but the modern versions are all because you can argue saying that Sir Kautilya had also talked about it, sir. So even in Bhagavad Gita you have all those things, Fair enough, but in the recent times the idea of equality, justice, liberty is all whose ideas? European ideas, Western ideas only, and that has actually contributed to the nation's growth. Fine, and the very simple reason is what? Most of the Constituent Assembly members were what? Educated in the West, most of them were lawyers, automatically that kind of values, and Congress mostly had that kind of an ideology. So because Congress led the freedom movement, that will have a overlap. Fine, so that is also another major contribution. Then another major factor which contributed was the balance between various institutions. Means what? Separation of power principle, checks and balances, no organ can dominate, and we follow, remember in UK they keep telling UK follows the principle of parliamentary sovereignty. Matlab kya hai? Look at the word itself, parliamentary sovereignty means who is sovereign? Parliament can take any major decisions. Remember that very famous statement called as what? UK Parliament can do anything and everything except make a man a woman and a woman a man. Matlab, I don't have to explain, you can easily understand that. That is the level of power that the UK Parliament has. But we don't follow parliamentary sovereignty. We follow constitutional supremacy. Matlab, constitution is supreme for us, not the legislature, not the executive, not the president, nor the PM also. So means that is the ultimate one. That's what we keep telling, what? Individuals come and go, but institutions stay. PMs will change, president will change, CMs will change, but what will stay? Parliament stays, legislature stays, constitution stays, judiciary stays. That matters a lot. To an extent, of course, there is a criticism that, sir, I think compared to all the three organs, legislature, executive and judiciary, judiciary has become very powerful, sir. Hence, there is a very famous criticism which says that India has moved from constitutional supremacy towards which supremacy? Judicial supremacy. There is a criticism that actually they are becoming very supreme. For example, recently 1 week back or 10 days back you had Supreme Court judgment on Election Commission of India. Ideally, Supreme Court should not be doing it. Ideally, I am telling. Because ideally, what is Supreme Court's role? Let us say, for example, Parliament has passed a law. Then what should Supreme Court tell? Is that law good or bad? Is that law constitutional or unconstitutional? That is your ideal role. When Parliament has passed a law, but what has Parliament not done? They have not passed a law. That's why what did the Supreme Court do? Supreme Court has no option but to interfere. So that is a loophole of democracy. Means what? When other two organs are performing well, then it's okay. What if there is, remember that is a technical word called as legislative vacuum. Vacuum ka matlab kya hai? Some space, something not done. So legislative vacuum means what then? Legislature is not performing its role properly. They are not passing the required necessary laws. So then what will happen? Someone has to interfere. That someone is who? Judiciary. Or you might have heard terms like judicial activism, judicial overreach. So all those has contributed to judicial supremacy. Fine. But according to the Constitution, even there are checks for judiciary also. I mean, there is some online question that I already asked, sir. I think judiciary is becoming very powerful, sir. According to the Constitution, Supreme Court judges can also be removed by the legislature. Supreme Court cannot do whatever they want to. There are a lot of limits even on them. They should stick to the concept of judicial restraint. If there is a case against judges, their own internal inquiries will be there. So it's so easy. But yes, it is a fact that we have moved literally, I mean, towards whom? Judicial supremacy because of judicial activism and overreach. But you can counter question, sir, is it good or bad? Compared to legislature becoming powerful or executive becoming powerful, that means what? Sir, legislative supremacy is good or executive supremacy is good, judicial supremacy is good. Relatively judicial supremacy is good. What is the reason? Popular organs. Popular ka matlab kya hai? If people demand, they will be ready to do whatever they want to. Because people elect you. You have to go back to people, they have to elect you again. Judges ka kya hai? You don't have to go back to people. So hence, judges may not necessarily take popular decisions, but ministers, and we all know that, look at you take any state across the country, ministers and MLAs and MPs will always talk emotionally and popularly. Reason? You have to be in news, only then people will get you back to power. Judges not necessary, because they are not directly accountable to them. Clear? That's the kind of criticism is also there. I am telling you, If in case you want to take like that, sir, which organs should be relatively having more power compared to legislature, who is much better? If the balance is little towards judiciary, it is much better for a democracy like India only. Fine. Ideally it should be a balance, that should, you should always talk about balance only. If in case I am telling extreme rare case, got it. So these are all various factors that has contributed to the success of Indian democracy. In addition, for example, in India what will happen, the army is never involved in what, the civil decision making. For example, Ministry of Defence takes the decision, Defence Minister, Defence Secretary takes the decision, Army General has to implement it. If Army General has to take the decisions, then the power will shift from the Defence Minister towards whom? Army General. It might be good in some years, but over a period what will happen, Army Generals will become so powerful that they can imagine the power they have, how much of people, the weapons, all those things, they will easily dominate the presidents and the prime ministers then. So that means democracy is gone. So that is the reason army should not be involved in the core decision making purpose. They should only implement whatever defence minister takes, defence secretary takes the decision. Clear? Those principles are all followed well. That is also the reason, remember you have now a concept called as chief of defence staff. Fine. So who is now Bipin Rawat and who is the, I forgot his name. Who is the chief? Huh? Anil Chauhan. Yeah, Anil Chauhan is chief of defence staff. This recommendation was given by the Kargil Review Committee also, means almost 20-25 years back. Even before that Naresh Chandra Committee had given. But they hesitated to create chief of defence staff for a very simple reason. He will be what? Commonly kind of what, he will have the control over army, navy, air force combinedly. And they had a fear that what if he becomes so powerful that he will take over. So that is the reason they were apprehensive, matlab, so many fears were there. Finally somehow they have made a balance and they have tried to create it, that is a different issue. Fine. These are all broader ideas which have contributed to the success of India's constitution or assembly. Got it? So yeah, let us write any doubts, we will write. If you have any doubts you can keep asking. Did we write any point or not yet? Huh? Doubt? Okay, fine, please note down. First one under factors responsible, composition of constituent assembly. Composition of constituent assembly. So please mention that point. Even though Congress dominated the assembly in terms of numbers, it had representation from all the sections of society. It had representation from all the sections of society. Representation from all the section of society, including, just give a reference, including Muslims, Christians, SC, ST, women, etc. Including Muslims, Christians, Sikh, SC, ST, women, etc. Obviously, what will this ensure? This ensures that the concerns of all the sections of society, the concerns of the needs of all the sections of society is reflected in Constitution. The concerns of all the sections of society is reflected in the Constitution. And that is composition of Constituent Assembly. Second one, the functioning of Constituent Assembly. Functioning of Constituent Assembly. Function mention this. Deliberation was followed. Deliberation process was followed. Deliberation process was followed in which deliberation process was followed in which detailed discussion was conducted. In which detailed discussion was conducted before including any provision in Constitution. Detailed discussion was conducted before including any provision in the Constitution. Before including any provision in the Constitution. And what is the goal? The goal was to achieve consensus. The goal was to achieve consensus. Right? Only if consensus is not achieved, then voting was preferred, and very rarely they preferred it. Only if they could not achieve consensus, voting was preferred. Voting was preferred. Fine. So that is another one, the way of functioning. Next one, legacy of freedom movement. Legacy of freedom movement. Legacy of freedom movement. During the freedom struggle itself, during the national movement itself, there was a broad consensus on. During the freedom movement itself, there was a broad consensus on. There was a broad consensus on the kind of constitution. There was a broad consensus on the kind of constitution that should be drafted for independent India. The kind of constitution that should be drafted for independent India. That should be drafted for independent India. Fine, if you want to give a specific reference, you can write that. That should be drafted for independent India. You can write below. Motilal Nehru report of 1920, committee was 28, you can tell it as 29. Motilal Nehru report of 1929. Motilal Nehru report of 1929. Karachi resolution drafted by Sardar Patel. Karachi resolution drafted by Sardar Patel. Karachi resolution drafted by Sardar Patel. Principles of secularism. Principles of secularism. Universal adult franchise principles of secularism, universal adult franchise were predetermined by the national leaders. That means they were already fixed, were predetermined by, that means before independence itself, they were predetermined by our national leaders. Fine. So, obviously, because you had a consensus, put those values in the constitution. So, work is relatively easy. That is another one. Next one, values mentioned in the constitution, that also matters a lot. Moral identity, values mentioned in constitution, values mentioned in the constitution, values mentioned in the constitution. So, you can refer to that. Values like equality, justice, values like equality, justice, liberty, fraternity, equality, justice, liberty and fraternity have ensured freedom and dignity, for every individual, irrespective of their other identities, Fine. Then next one, balanced institutional design means balance of power, checks and balances. Balanced institutional design. Separation of power. Tell what do you mean by that? Separation of power, checks and balances, means one organ checking. We have already discussed all these things. Separation of power, checks and balances are the foundation principles. Separation of power, checks and balances are the foundation principles of Indian Constitution. It is ensured that no organ gets ultimate power. It is ensured that no organ can concentrate power or gets ultimate power. No organ can concentrate power. Fine. India follows the principle of constitutionality. India follows the principle of constitutional supremacy. Fine. In margin you can clarify other two ones also. UK follows the principle of parliamentary sovereignty. UK follows this, just interlinking, just to have a broader idea. UK follows the principle of parliamentary sovereignty. Fine. US follows principle of which one? Judicial supremacy. This is extra point just to give a reference. US follows the principle of judicial supremacy. Fine. And as of now, what they are criticizing? At present, there is a criticism that At present, there is a criticism that India is moving towards which principle? Yeah, India is moving towards judicial supremacy, transition towards. At present, there is a criticism that India is moving towards judicial. That India is moving towards judicial supremacy. Fine. Even you should remember the look at the broader one. Just now remember recently before break we gave an example that in Chile recently they conducted a referendum for some changes in their constitution. But remember, India drafted and made the constitution, let's say January 26, 1950, all those things you have. That original constitution was also not given for referendum. Means what? They did not ask the people of India, are you happy with this constitution? No. It was completely decided by whom? The assembly members only. Fine, people of India have never been asked. Then from then on if you take till now, 105 times Indian constitution has been amended, and that too that 105 times amendment is only under 368 related. Other amendments are also there. Okay, let's take it as only 360. 105 times it has been amended. Not a single time people of India have been asked. Getting the point? It means not a single change in the Indian constitution is given to referendum. People of India have never been asked there. You may express your feedback opinion if that's a different issue. You may write an article, this, that's a different. Voting power was never given with respect to this. Even then, how did Indians agree to this?
Because it was representative.
Exactly, because of all these factors, that even though it is not given to referendum, people have largely accepted. I'm not sure if you look at the comparative constitution, what they call, that means if you study the constitutions across the world, probably India is the only exception, I guess. With that a detailed constitution, this level of diversity and so many number of amendments, we have never subjected it to referendum. But still largely people agree to this. That's what, as they keep telling, India is one of the curious countries, the most curious country in the world. Where the entire world rejects, we will accept it. Where the entire world accepts, that we will reject. Because of our complex civilization, diversity, you never know what works, what doesn't work. So it is one of the examples is this also. If the same thing happens in US to this details and what their constitution started from 1787 till now, that is, it has been amended somewhere around 35 or 30, let's say less than 40 times. But we have amended 105 times. And their constitution is a very small one. Imagine our constitution, the lengthiest in the world. But still largely is accepted. That is all credit of all these factors. Got an idea? You can clarify this point also in margin. The original constitution was never subjected to referendum. These are all additional details we are just giving. Original constitution, the 1950 constitution, was never subjected to referendum. In simple words, people were not asked their vote. Original constitution was never subjected to referendum. Never subjected to referendum. Even other amendments were also not given for referendum. Fine. That is another major factor. Yeah, these are various, of course, multiple things are there, but broadly these are the factors which contributed to the success of Indian democracy or constitution, whatever you call that as. Remember, that's why they keep telling the success of a democracy or constitution does not depend not only on the features of the constitution. Remember, there is a very famous statement of even Ambedkar, even Dr. Rajendra Prasad, that what? You may have the best constitution in the world in terms of features, but there is no guarantee that it will work best. Because the success or failure of the constitution depends on whom? The character of the leaders who run the constitution. So that means what? It depends on the leaders, and most importantly it depends on the trust of the common man in the system. That means what? If common man doesn't believe that this constitution is good, you do whatever you want to, one or other day they will do. They will rebel, they will revolt, whatever, things will go out of control. Fine? Clarify that statement also. Finally, as a one, to conclude, as said by Dr. Ambedkar and Rajendra Prasad, as said by Dr. Ambedkar and Rajendra Prasad, as said by Dr. Ambedkar and Rajendra Prasad, Dr. Ambedkar and Rajendra Prasad, we may have the best constitution in the world. I am just paraphrasing, matlab not the exact quote unquote, core is the same, meaning we may have the best constitution in the world in terms of features. We may have the best constitution in the world. In fact, that itself is an advantage. Okay, we will write that. We may have the best constitution in the world in terms of features, but its success depends on, in terms of features, but its success depends on what? But its success depends on the character. Its success depends on the character of, its success depends on the character of the people who run the system or who run the constitution. People, leaders, any words you can use. Its success depends on the character of the people who run the constitution, who implement the constitution. Fine. In fact, the feature that we took, what, all these concepts from other countries, that itself is an advantage. Means what? Remember, we keep telling we took fundamental rights, judicial related from US, lot of things from UK, a lot of things from France, this, that. That actually itself is an advantage. Like how they keep, remember in Yojana also you keep getting that first statement, let the noble thoughts come from everywhere. The Rigveda one, that kind of a feature means what? We did not hesitate that only Indian features will put it in constitution. No. Whatever has worked across the world, pick the best. You can still put that. That itself is another biggest advantage. You can write that factor also. Indian constitution has borrowed, this is just an added, I mean you can write in margin wherever you have space, because after conclusion I just remember this. Indian constitution has borrowed features from, or you can say has borrowed the best features from across the world. They have borrowed the best features from across the world. So what does it indicate? It indicates borrowed the best features from across the world. It indicates that the constitution makers rejected narrow perspective. The constitution makers rejected the narrow perspective, and were ready to learn from others, and were ready to take the best from others, whatever, and were ready to learn from others. Got it? So these are all various factors that contributed to the constitution. So this is one major factor, the first major chapter of your Indian constitution at work. We are still in the starting basics. Of course, the next chapter we'll start with is your, we'll not do the acts 1773, all those things we'll do it at the end, because those are all factual aspects. And you know, modern India will be done broadly, they will be knowing Governor General, all those things. Factual aspect we'll keep it to the end. Let's focus on the conceptual aspects first. We'll start with making of constitution chapter, then we'll directly go to parliamentary system and federal system, because that basics you need. Then we'll come back and continue with preamble, fundamental rights, DPSP and all those things. Fine. Before that, first day will we end or? Okay, just a brief one. What is the difference between state, country, nation, those things? Then we'll continue with other aspects. What is the definition of state? This was your 2021 prelims question. What do you mean by state? State means not the, I mean the other concept of state, what Uttar Pradesh state, Maharashtra state, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, that is different one. The political concept called as state.
So it has a defined territory and a limited
Okay. Any other ones? Some vibration. Huh? Community or population? Bas, एक ही.
There are four conditions for it.
Correct. Go on.
And one is a limited geographical area, a sovereign government, a group of people should be there, and the fourth one I'm not actually.
Yeah. So that key factor you forgot was sovereignty. Correct. For example, when we keep using the word state, there are four components. First one is territory, population, government, the 2021 prelims answer was where this word. Those who identified this word, so they have got it correct. If you miss that word, that means it's gone, because there is very small differences between country, state, all those things. So state means when you say you should have four cons. So state is, just copy this, state is a political entity, that means political concept. State is a political entity with four components. What are they? One is territory, population, government, and last one, sovereignty. As of now, sovereignty means, take it as what? Ultimate decision making power. In other words, we will take our own decisions, we will not depend on others. That is the basic idea. Fine. And when you say government, this again is a US concept, but still largely followed across the world. When you say government, it includes who? All the three organs. So next time when you use the word state, when we use the word government, so just identify this difference. State means a more broader concept. Government means what? Only these three. So when you say president is the head of the state, PM is the head of the government, that means which is more broader concept? Head of the state. That's why according to the constitution, president is the first citizen, because he is head of the state. Government is just one part of the state. Got it? So government is all three organs, that is legislature, executive, judiciary. State is a more broader concept, territory, population, government and sovereignty. Clear? Now when you use the word country, then what do you mean by country? Just copy, keep copying. When you say country, take it as it is a geographical entity. You can also add the same, you should have a limited, or not limited exactly, you can say a kind of specified territory, a specified population. You can also have a government. But what is not guaranteed here? Sovereignty is not guaranteed. If you add sovereignty to this, then it becomes state. Fine. So territory, population, government. That's why it is a geographical entity. India is so and so with so and so square kilometer geography, what land area, so and so coastal area. So those are all what you call it as, and population of 140 crore, and so you have a legislature, executive, judiciary. That concept is called as country then. Clear? Then what do you mean by nation? Nation means, nation is a psychological, emotional belongingness. Psychological, emotional belongingness of people. Fine. And what you need? It is normally based on a common culture or identity. Like what, sir? It can be your religion, it can be language, it can be ethnicity, or it can be region, whatever, so many are there, history, etc. And the definition that we use today of nation is what concept? So we use the European concept. That's why look at, you take England. So English speaking people with Christianity. So means what? English speaking people, Christianity. You take France, French speaking Christianity. You take Italian, Italian Christianity. Germany, German. Now things have changed. Now because of the globalization effect, all those things, diversity has changed. We are telling when the nation was formed, obviously they had a common identity. So that is the European definition. That's why, remember, have you heard, like Europeans keep telling, I mean when British were ruling India, they kept on telling that India has never been a nation, because they are using what definition? This definition. For them, people who speak one, I mean you should have some common identity like a language or religion, then according to them it is nation. But look at India. By that definition, that's why they keep telling India is one country or one state with multiple nations, by this definition. Because if you follow this definition, take Punjab, Sikh religion, Punjabi language. Take Tamil Nadu, lastly one Tamil language, Bengali language, Marathi language, Kannada language, Telugu language, Malayalam language, Odia language. So by the European definition, India is one state, multiple nations. European definition I am telling. Fine, because if you use this, because everybody will develop concepts based on their experience. In Europe, that is the experience they have. That's why they have developed concept like that.
So sir, we are in still the process of nation building.
Yeah, if you follow this idea. That's why we keep telling India is a nation in making. Reason is because you still have the north versus south issue will keep on going. The Kashmir issue is still there. Khalistan issue, now though not very strong, it is still there that they want to make. And the northeast issue, the Nagalim issue, all those things are still there. That's why they keep telling India is a nation in making. Clear? So we'll get to that, but this is a basic idea, you got it. So when you say nation, it is a psychological, emotional belongingness of the people. You should have some common cultural identity. It can be anything, either one or a combination also. Fine, if you want examples, you write. For example, France, French speaking Christianity. Just some 2-3 you can write. Germany, German speaking Christianity. France, French speaking Christianity. Germany, German speaking Christianity. Fine. Or you take for example Israel, Judaism, whatever you call it as, Jews, and then Hebrew. Hebrew is the language they speak. Israel. So by that definition, Israel is a typical nation. Israel, religion is Jews or Judaism, and the language they speak broadly is Hebrew. So by that definition, actually Pakistan is a nation by that definition, because Islam and largely let's say Urdu by that definition. Pakistan, Islam, India doesn't, I mean India is a separate concept, we will discuss in detail later, and then Urdu. Fine, that is the reason we keep telling what? You cannot apply the European concept of nation directly to the Indian concept, because India is a more complicated, more diverse nation. Okay, so nation, country, okay, country we discussed, state we discussed, fine. Then government also I told you the difference. Now comes, if you have heard the words, sometimes we keep using this term called as, what is it? Nation state. So you just use the chronology, means what? You already have a nation concept, then you get together and form a state. For very simple, the best example is unification of Germany. If you have studied world history, or if you have a basic idea, remember the Bismarck one, the policy of what do you call this, blood and iron. So means what? In simple words, German speaking people were spread across multiple empires. Now what did Bismarck do? So his only intention was all the German speaking people, we already feel that we all are one, because we all speak German, we all follow Christianity. Then what he felt? All the German speaking people should be under one government. We should all stay together. Different Austria-Hungarian Empire, Prussian Empire, this empire we don't want. All the Germans, one group. That means according to that definition, if you go, already they have a commonality. What is the commonality? Already the psychological feeling, they have a psychological feeling that they all are one. So then unification of Germany happened, and then what they created? They created a state. That means what they created? They created this. They got together, they will make a constitution, they create a government, and that government will become what? Sovereign. So nation feeling is already existing, then you create state. Got an idea? So what comes first? Nation feeling first comes. Then you create, for example, remember recently you have a demands going on across the world, many demands are there. Fine, you might have heard the demand for something called as Kurdistan. Fine, Kurdistan, the name itself says is done by Kurds. It's obviously it's a Muslim minority. And where are they spread across? Iraq to Iran to, yes, of course, as I said, Turkey to, in fact, Syria. And what do they feel? Same apply the German concept. Germans spread across Prussian Empire, Austria-Hungarian Empire, so and so empires. What are Kurds spread across? Iraq, Iran, Turkey, Syria. And what do they feel? Their feeling is we already feel that we all are one. And what are we? We are spread across multiple countries. So then what is their demand? Wherever Kurds are living, make it as Kurdistan. That means their demand is typically nation state, because they feel they are already a nation, because they feel emotionally they feel they are all connected. Then now they are demanding state. That is Kurdistan. In India itself you have a demand, if you have heard, what is the demand? There is a demand for something called as Nagalim, Greater Nagaland, whatever you call it as. The name itself says it is by whom? Nagas. And they want the entire Nagaland and parts of course, the neighboring states, parts of Manipur, parts of Arunachal Pradesh, parts of Assam, plus what? Parts of Myanmar also, because they feel Nagas are spread across, I mean, of course, neighboring will be there. So they feel all of them we have to get together and form Nagalim. That means they already feel they are all one nation. Then now they what they need? They want state. These are examples for nation state. So got an idea? You please write it. Okay, before this you write that idea. First put the heading nation state. First clarify that, then we will write this example. So what do you mean by nation state? Here people already have a feeling or already are emotionally connected. Here the people are already emotionally connected. People are already emotionally connected. And what they need? They want to get together and make their own state. Here people are already emotionally connected. They want to get together. They want to get together and form their own state. They want to get together and form their own state. Fine. So write the best example. Example, unification of Germany led by Bismarck. Example, unification of Germany. Unification of Germany led by Bismarck. Led by Bismarck. German speaking people were spread across. Just will give a brief. German speaking people were spread across multiple empires. German speaking people were spread across multiple empires. Fine. Bismarck integrated all of them. And created their own state. Bismarck integrated all of them and created their own state. And Italy is also same. You might have heard, so Mazzini, Garibaldi, so many people were there. Fine, that is one idea. Now write this Kurdistan. So their demand for Kurdistan is what? Nations. So just follow this. Kurdistan, Kurds, Muslim minority spread across multiple, exactly copy paste the German angle. Done? Then again the same. So then the last concept, state nation. So there what comes first? State comes first, then you create the nation feeling. State nation. State nation. Here state is created first. Here state is created first. Here state is created first, which itself acts as a common factor. Here the state is created first, which itself acts as a common factor, in forming a nation, in creating a nation. So that means what? Constitution itself is a common factor for us. Indianness, I mean, what do you call us, is our same rules. Parliament is a common factor for us. So to state itself is becoming a common factor to create a nation. Remember, so that means, for example, according to this is what? According to few scholars, again there are a lot of controversies. Some may tell, no, India has always been a nation, all those things that we will discuss. Again, there is still a concept called a civilizational state. Like for example, according to Yogendra Yadav, India is a state nation. Means what? On January 26, 1950, India was still not a nation. Yes, there were largely freedom movement, everything was there, but still what you had so many problems still going on. At that time there was still the demand, in northeast integration still had not happened, because freedom movement had also not penetrated there. In south there was a demand for something called as Dravida Nadu. India's partition was going on, Bengal partition, the Punjab partition, Khalistan, I mean what, Sikhs wanted their own separate country, Kashmir issue was still there, the Hyderabad integration, so many issues were still going on. How do you call yourself as a nation then? When you have so many problems of integration, nation means what? Emotionally you should be feeling that we all are one. At that day you did not have it. So what came first? We somehow managed and created a constitution. So that means we had a concept of state came in, legislature, this, that, everything. Then what we gradually started to do? Gradually we started to accommodate all of them. Northeast problem we solved, south problem we solved, Kashmir issue is still pending unfortunately, Khalistan more or less we have solved it. So hence state has come first, nation evolved later. Got it? Some people question it also saying no, India has always been a state, nation state, because freedom movement had already integrated all of us. But some people counter it saying if freedom movement had already integrated, then why did you have the problems of the revenue, whatever so-and-so issues in Wolfram movement, this, that in northeast or in Kashmir issue or Khalistan issue or southeast Dravida Nadu issue, why did you have it? Like that, so many pros and cons. You can argue here also, you can argue there also. That is why we are just mentioning scholars. Got it? I mentioned that according to Yogendra Yadav, India is a state nation. according to Yogendra Yadav. Remember the Swaraj Abhiyan? Arvind Kejriwal, I mean former partner of Arvind Kejriwal. According to Yogendra Yadav, India is a state nation. India is a state nation. So what do you mean by that? It means we created a constitution and thereby state first. It means we created the constitution and the state first. Created the constitution and the state, or in bracket you can write Jan 26, 1950. We created that first, which itself contributed to transform India into a nation, which itself contributed to the transformation of India, which itself contributed to the transformation of India into a nation. Transformation of India into a nation. Fine. Again clarify in margin, according to Yogendra Yadav, India is, or even according to the European definition also, according to Yogendra Yadav or European definition, India is what? State with multiple nations. Again I am clarifying, this is European definition of nation. India is a one state with multiple nations. State means, again do not use the concept of the normal Uttar Pradesh, Bihar state, do not use political concept of state. India is one state with multiple nations. So why is it like that? Because Punjab itself is a nation, Tamil Nadu itself is a nation by this definition. Because Punjab, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Bengal, Karnataka, whatever, some 2, 3 you write. Punjab, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Bengal are all nations by this definition, by the European definition. Punjab, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, West Bengal are all nations by this definition. Clear? Then the last concept, put the heading civilizational state, which is not globally accepted, but there is a concept. This is not globally accepted one, this is an Indian concept, civilizational state. This is a counter for nation state concept, because according to European definition you should have one major common factor, right? And what they tell, because India does not have one major common factor, what are you? You are not nation state, you are what? State nation, because constitution itself is your common factor, not a religion, not a language, not a this one. But what is the counter concept? Sir, why do you need a religion or a language only as common factor? Why can't you have what as common factor? Civilization as a common factor. India is a, remember we keep telling India is an ancient civilization right from Harappan ages, Rig Veda, all those things. So for us it is not religion, it is not ethnicity, it is not also, what is the common factor here? Civilization. It is what they tell, because they, what is their counterpoint? If India did not have one common factor, how did they largely remain one or other way together? Is the counter factor. What is the counter for them? Who told you that they largely remain together? It was all different empires. So which one will you follow? That depends on your subjective interpretation, because it's all a counterpoint. So this is largely a right, that means the political right concept, saying that we all have always been together, we follow civilization. Got it? Hence that's why I am clarifying again, this is not globally accepted definition, but it's an evolving, a lot of people are mentioning this. Got the idea? So what is common for us? Civilization is the common thread throughout our history. Clarify that. It means, what do you mean by civilizational state? It means is the it means civilization itself is a common factor throughout Indian history. It means civilization itself is a common factor throughout the Indian history. Throughout the Indian history, and India became a state on 26th 1950. So civilization is first, nation comes later. and India became a state on 26th Jan 1950, because we became sovereign. We will discuss later tomorrow, again we will discuss, come back to all those topics. Clear? Again clarify. However, this is not globally accepted concept. However, this is not yet a globally accepted concept. It may, we never know how it progresses. As of now, it is not. However, it is not a globally accepted concept at present, as of today. Fine, so got a broad idea. So state, government, nation, country, nation state, state nation, civilizational state. Where does India fit in? India fits in everything. India is a nation also, country also, state also, nation state, state nation, because for very simple reason, most of the concepts developed in Europe, which is very, very less diverse, and India is what? Too much of a diversity. Entire Europe, if you combine, even the entire Europe doesn't have India's level of diversity. So that's why obviously concepts are very, very complicated. Got it? So this is one major basics one. So other one, making of the constitution, all those things will start from tomorrow. Fine, then we'll continue with other chapters. Any doubts, please ask, or you can revise and ask of course tomorrow also. Doubts till now? Or let's finish the class as quickly as possible. Okay, fine, we'll continue tomorrow.